Well, another week, another former Oshawa general on the OHL podcast. People are going to start thinking I'm biased and I'm a Kitchener guy. Ryan Lindsay joining the pod. Hey, thanks a lot for making the time. It's good to have you here.
Yeah, no, it was quite the thrill to be asked to have a chat. Don't get that very often, so this is pretty good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm sure it doesn't surprise you that it's another in a succession of Oshawa generals. Very proud franchise and a ton of history there with the Gens for sure.
Yeah, you know what? When I first got drafted to Oshawa, I didn't know um, just how proud of a franchise it was. I did have the privilege of watching them win the Memorial Cup in Hamilton in 1990, back when Lindros was there. But at that time, I was only 14, and I still didn't believe I'd play in the OHL someday, or if I did, what team I'd play for. And getting drafted to Oshawa was a thrill because again, I'd watched them win the Memorial Cup in my hometown, and it was surreal, really, when my name was called to join the franchise.
The owners too, John and Barbara Humphreys. I mean, a heck of a family that you and I think they made you feel like that when you were a member of that organization, didn't they?
First class all the way. And there was a saying, and once a general, always a general, and that was also reiterated by Wayne Daniels, who was the general manager at the time. And that franchise, maybe some people say things, but they really do follow up on that motto.
Can we go back, if we can, to being a fan, watching Oshawa win the Memorial Cup in your hometown of Hamilton? Because we've talked about, obviously, that Memorial Cup on this podcast, I don't know how many times. And in fact, one of our last guests was a member of that winning team, Jared Scaldi. But I'll tell you, for my money, Ryan, it was hands down the best Memorial Cup this country has ever seen. There has not yet been one to match it. But what was it like taking that as a fan and as a young hockey player?
You know what? It was the first time I think I'd really watched the Memorial Cup. And my parents had bought tickets for the whole tournament, so we were able to go and watch the games. And just following the OHL that year, my good friend Troy Smith, we grew up as family friends, and we'd have Sunday dinners together at their house or at our house. They had builded some Hamilton Steelhawks previously, and then that year was the Hamilton Dukes that had moved in, and they had built one of the players in that team. So we were already following the Hamilton Dukes that year, who were supposed to have been the host in the Memorial Cup that year. Unfortunately, didn't have a great year, and the OHL decided to switch things up and have that two teams that had to win the playoffs to go to the Memorial Cup, and there wasn't a host franchise that year. So just following that whole season and the whole Eric Lindros, his first year in the OHL, and not going to the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds, and there was a chance at that point that either Hamilton or Oshawa was going to get Eric, and then Eric ended up getting traded to Oshawa. It was neat to follow that as a kid, and the fact that the games were so good. And I still remember, I think it was the round robin game, Oshawa Kitchener. I may be misremembering. Maybe it could have been the WHL team, but there was an overtime game, and it was. I still remember the call, and I think it was one of the TSN commentators, and they said something like, "It is over." I remember that was a wonderful call, but yeah, you're right. It was an amazing tournament, and the final was just fantastic.
You mentioned your good friend Troy Smith, so let's just rip this Band-Aid off. First of all,
right.
You're judged by the company you keep here. You know that, right?
For sure.
But Smitty keeps chirping me that he deserves associate producer's credit on this podcast. He's connected me with a number of people who have been guests, yourself included.
Right.
Toad is your nickname for him?
Well, it wasn't my nickname for him. That was his family's nickname for him. But as I mentioned earlier, we grew up both in Hamilton. I played with his older brother in the first few years of our hockey lives, and Troy's father, Dave, was my coach in a lot of those years. Our families just hit it off. They had 4 boys. We had three. I had 2 other siblings, myself, and yeah, we just in the summer when hockey was over, we'd get together on Sundays and have a dinner, and the kids would just play all sorts of sports in the backyard and get into too much trouble. But yeah, Toad was the nickname that his family gave him. So I'm glad that's now out in the open.
I hear from, I believe it's Smitty's brother, that it was always tough. You were always coming second place, Ryan, to a Smith, be it hockey, lacrosse, take your pick. How was that? How it happened? What's your version of that story?
I'm assuming this is Mike Smith trying
That's right.
to
That's
chirp
right.
in right now. Yeah. So well, I'll give him credit. My last year in university hockey at the University of New Brunswick, we hosted the Nationals. We played against St. FX, which both Smith boys were playing for X that year. And home ice, we had the 2-0 lead. Halfway through the game, they ended up tying it in the third, and we had a power play in overtime to win it. And as the penalty expired, the puck came out of the zone, and St. FX had a 2-on-1, and they scored to win it. So yeah, that was one of those handshakes. My career was over for university hockey at that point, and although I was pretty upset, pretty sad, giving a hug to those two guys made things a lot better, and I was happy that they got to taste the championship.
That's exactly the story that Mike shared, by the way. Same championship, but since you bring that up, let's back it up. That may have been the way your university career ended at UNB, but it started with a championship, a university hockey championship, which came the year after your OHL championship with the Gens in '97. And just a few years after that, you were winning a United championship with Quad City. I mean, that was like, I think I counted 3 and 5 or 6 years. You like winning or something, Ryan, or what's the deal here?
It's kind of you to bring that up. But it's an interesting story. And I'll throw in between the national championship with UNB and the United Hockey Championship. I was fortunate enough to play on the national team, and we won a Spengler Cup as well. So that was a nice treat to win that one. But I do coach now young kids, and I tell them the story that my Hamilton teams growing up that I played on, we had really good teams every year. I think we had 7 or 8 kids that ended up getting drafted to OHL teams down the line, but we always lost in the final, and we always got close. And I remember my particular journey was, I felt like in semifinal games or in games that it wasn't a do or die, I felt like I was always at my best. And then whenever I got to the final, the game 7, I felt like I just couldn't perform. I felt like it just wasn't there. My legs were heavy. My hands were slow. Everything just felt off. And going into the OHL, my first 3 years, we had good teams. We were first or second in the division most times, and we lost in the first round every year. And it was devastating. And my 4th year, we had a new coach, Bill Stewart, came in, and he just had a different mindset. And for whatever reason, for me, it just clicked. And it came down to the fact that in those early years, and this is crazy to think about, if we were in a road game or at home and the other team scored the first goal, I can remember thinking briefly, oh, we're going to lose this game. And it's crazy to think that way. Looking back now, thinking it's just one goal. You got 60 minutes in the game. But for some reason, when I was first at that age, I would get negative. I'd get down on myself. So fast forward to Bill Stewart that year, and we would have a lot of discussions about these types of things. And he said to me, he goes, you know what you got to do? He goes, every shift that you line up for, just pick one guy in the other team. And instead of worrying about winning and losing, look at that guy and say, that guy's not going to outwork me tonight. And focus on that. And the whole game, just focus on that guy on that team, number 17, whatever the guy's number is. Just focus on beating that guy to every loose puck. And at the end of the day, you'll be much, much better hockey player. And I don't know if that was what made the switch for me personally, but from there on, I felt like I was a much better player in those do or die type games.
What was that, based on what you just said? And you had good teams, but you were getting bounced early in the playoffs. What was that 97 run like for you that you recall of it as you moved through? I think it was Peterborough, then Kitchener, then Ottawa in the final that you move on to the Memorial Cup. But what was it like as that playoff built?
It was interesting because we had finished second overall in the league that year, but Ottawa was in our division. And there were then at that time there were three divisions. So the top seeds in each division got 1, 2, 3 seeds. So we went into the playoffs as the fourth seed. The other side was that as a one seed back then, you had a choice of either playing in the first round or taking a bye. And Ottawa, which had finished first the year before in our division, took the bye the year before and lost in their first round, which was the second round. They decided this year to play, which then passed the bye opportunity on to us. So we, as the second place team, we got a week off in the first round, and Bill Stewart was adamant that he thought, you know what, guys, this is great. He goes, if you're in a marathon and it's a 30K race, and you get to start the race at 20K, you're going to be fresher. You're going to be in better shape. So that was the mindset. And that being said, he worked our butts off that week. We had a week of a bye, and we were in the gym, we were on the ice, it was bag skated. It was a hard week, but he prepared us for the playoff run. And yeah, sure enough, we got off to a great start against Peterborough. I think at one point we were up 3-0 in the series before we had a hiccup and lost back-to-back games and had to go into Peterborough in Game 6 to win. And so we won Game 6, moved on. Played Kitchener in the next round. Same thing. We got off to a good start. We were up 2-0 and 3-1. Had a hiccup in Kitchener and then came home and won that in Game 6. But then in the final against Ottawa, it was I think we beat them once that year in the regular season. They had a tremendous team, great all-time coach, Brian Kilray. I don't think we expected to win, but we were confident. And Game 1 was in Ottawa. We lost in overtime. We came home and we won. And we went back to Ottawa, lost in overtime again. Came home, won again. Went for Game 5 in Ottawa, and we won. And all of a sudden, we were coming home with a chance to win the OHL in Game 6 on home ice. And I just remember we were so late in the season that we were told, pack your bags in case we lose, because we'll be on the bus up to Ottawa for the next night, and then we'll be on to Hull for the Memorial Cup if we qualify the next day. So they had told us, get your stuff ready in case we lose tonight. I never packed my bag. I don't know if I just forgot or I just was so focused or whatever the reason was. I didn't bring my bag to the rink that night. And we were winning. We were winning with about 6 minutes to go in the third. Ottawa tied it up. We went into the dressing room, and again, we'd already lost 2 overtime games to these guys. We'd lost at least 1 overtime game to Kitchener, and I think we lost to Peterborough. So overtime wasn't our thing that run. And Bill came into the room, and he looked at all of us and said, "It's up to you." Left the room, and the veteran leaders on that team, we got riled up, we got excited, and I think we scored first shift 27 seconds in to win it. And it was like I said, it was unexpected. And I walking around the rink that night with the cup and celebrating with my teammates. I hadn't realized that was my last game in the OHL. Like going into that night, I didn't even think about that. It wasn't even a thought in my head. So to Bill's credit, I think he got the best of us to leave those thoughts in the closet and just come out and work your ass off and try to outperform the guy against you. So yeah, it was an unbelievable run.
Did you ever pack a bag ahead of time again? I mean, if you right, come on, you just never would do it, would you?
Yeah, like I said, I don't know why. And maybe I made the conscious decision saying, no, we're going to win tonight. I don't know what it was, but yeah, didn't pack a bag and just, did I ever do it again? No, I mean, we never were in that situation again. It was a weird situation where they said, we're going to win tonight, but if we don't win, make sure you're ready for the bus because we got to go to Ottawa tonight and play tomorrow, and we won't be coming back because Hull's right there. So it just seemed like too much. I think the guys were just like, no, we're going to win tonight. And yeah, Mark Savard with first shift in overtime buried the winner.
Was it strange for you when it dawned on you later that you had just played that last OHL game. I just thought that's so interesting that you're so caught up in the moment that it never occurred to you. It must have at some point. And, I've seen so many guys when they graduate from the league. It's a tough thing to do when you realize that part, that's such a meaningful part of your career is over.
Yeah, it was. It was bizarre. It was so I remember we're skating around, we're celebrating with the cup, and there's people make signs and go Gens go and whatnot. And there was a sign, and it said Flying Ryan, we're gonna miss you. Thanks for your time here, something along the lines of that. And I looked up and I was like, holy crap, that this was the last game. Like it hadn't dawned on me, and I remember taking a lot of time before I went off the ice there, and just to sort of soak it all in. But it was difficult because we 3 days later we were starting the Memorial Cup, so it was a wonderful celebration. It was a great moment to be able to finish your game and sort of on your terms in your rink with your fans and your family there. Yeah, it was a wonderful moment for sure.
What was the Memorial Cup experience like for you?
Um, it was it's hard to say. It wasn't what I thought it would be. We were 2-1 in the round robin. We got destroyed by Hull. We lost 8-0. I broke my thumb in that game, and I just felt like I feel like we never got our best game that whole tournament. I feel like maybe our Memorial Cup was beating Ottawa and winning the OHL. I feel maybe we didn't have enough time to come down from that high and then get revved back up for the Memorial Cup. I felt like we weren't quite there. And that being said, Hull was an amazing team. They were loaded with some great players and some Stanley Cup champions. And I think it was Claude Julien was their coach. Yeah, we were overmatched by them, but I still feel like we didn't come out and have our best game, and we were a bit injured, we were a bit banged up. The Ottawa series was tough on our group, and John Tripp had got injured in I think the first or second game of the Memorial Cup. He had a pretty bad Charlie horse, but you know what? Hey, we were in the semifinals. We were in overtime against Lethbridge, and my good friend Jay Schweitzer had a shot to hit the crossbar, and then Lethbridge came down and Byron Ritchie scored to send them to the Memorial Cup. So it was a great experience, but I certainly feel like winning the OHL was more of the highlight for our group that year. And so Memorial Cup was exciting. I just feel like we didn't have our best that week.
It's funny you describe it that way, Ryan, because there's been an interesting discussion going on as you and I are talking right now during the OHL final, and some folks have been pointing out that they think the league title means more than the Memorial Cup because you go through a 68 game regular season, you go through all those rounds of playoffs, and then the Memorial Cup's like a nice added bonus, if you will. But it's such a short tournament.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have your best, and here you are talking about looking back on that, and the OHL, the league championship, meant so much in retrospect.
Yeah, I almost feel like the teams that do well the Memorial Cup are the teams that have been there before, or they've been building for a few years, and they're expected to be there. And yeah, our run was culmination for a bunch of us in our third and fourth years in the league, but we were also pretty young. My roommate that year was Brian Allen, became a first round pick in the NHL, had a great NHL career. But he was 16 years old, and he was one of our best defensemen by the end of that tournament. We had some fantastic rookies that year in Kevin Cawley and Brent Govro. But again, they were 16, 17 years old. And it's hard to play against a team like Hull that was loaded with 19 and 20 year olds. Yeah, I don't know. I know that we wanted to win a Memorial Cup, but it wasn't that burning desire that I think that a team like Hull, who had been building for a year, knowing they were going to be in the Memorial Cup, I think it was maybe just a little different for that type of a team. Yeah, I don't know.
We talked about Bill Stewart and clearly the impact that he had and the different approach that he brought after taking over for another coach, a big name coach. I mean, you look at your resume, Ryan, and so along with Bill Stewart, Stan Butler, Dave McQueen. I mean, you had some
Yeah.
guys leading you as a young hockey player.
Yeah, what's it's pretty impressive actually when I talk about putting in my application to coach kids hockey. When I can put a resume together that some of the coaches that I've been fortunate enough to play for. Rick Kornacki also was my first coach in Oshawa there. Mike Kelly at UNB, who has been in the NHL with Jared Gallant for a number of years now. Mike Johnston and Willie Desjardins on the national team. Gardner McDougall at UNB. There's the list. I've been fortunate to play for some great coaches, but even more important, some great people. And I think the common theme amongst all of those men is that they're interested in making sure that you're not just a hockey player, you're a good person, and you're going to develop and become a better person. So that's I'm pretty fortunate to have played for all those great men.
I had the chance. So Dave McQueen has been on the podcast before. I had the chance to meet Gardner McDougall during the playoffs this year because he stopped by Kitchener for a couple of games over a weekend. But how about that trick he pulled off last year from UNB, called on to coach the St. John Sea Dogs after they fired their coach getting bounced in the first round, and then ho-hum, Memorial Cup champion. Unreal.
Yeah, you know what? It was great for myself and for my boys here at home to follow the tournament, but also the press conferences afterwards. I feel he owned the press conferences. I thought he was just a pure Gardner McDougall. And honestly, the strength of Gardner, in my opinion, is that people really enjoy his honesty, and he's not afraid to be a little goofy if it has to get his point across. And I mean that in the most respectful way, in the sense of the goofiness, because he brings people out of their uncomfortable state, perhaps, because he's not too proud to sort of muck it up a bit and be a bit of a goofball and make a laugh that just relaxes the guys. And he's a tremendously passionate guy when it comes to his team, his family. I've seen it, and it rubs off on his players, and people buy into his beliefs. And yeah, when you have that, it's easy to put together a good team.
Do you draw on some of the experiences you had with these guys into your own coaching today?
100%. I feel like you should steal a little bit of everybody that you've gone along with, and take the best of what they've shown you and sort of put it together with what you think you're good at. Yeah, no, I definitely draw on all that. And it's interesting still, to this day. Mike Kelly was sort of like a father figure to me, being a first year university student at UNB, and he was my first coach there. He had that. He was the first coach that I had where we were treated as men, because again, I was a 21-year-old freshman at UNB, and most of the guys on my team were 24, 25. Some had already played pro hockey. So he treated us like men, but he demanded a lot of us. And at times he'd be hard on people like me that could drive coaches nuts from time to time with the way I played. But even when he was angry at me, he always had a good twinkle in his eye, which always made me feel that, he's pissed off at me, but he still cares and he wants the best. So anyway, to this day, Mike and I still keep in touch. I texted him, as early as April this year. My brother and I went to New York City for the weekend to celebrate his upcoming wedding. And I texted Mike, and it was the last regular season game there. Leafs were in Madison Square Garden, and asked him if he could somehow find some tickets for us, and he did. And yeah, I still keep in touch with him quite a bit. But all of those coaches have had a great influence on me, for sure.
I can't help but pick up a little bit further on the way you played. Sometimes pissed the coach off. What? No back check, no defense, Lindsay. What's the deal here?
I don't think it was the back check. I'd say I was a decent two-way player. I think I just like to make a lot of high-risk plays that, maybe you should dump the puck in at the blue line, not try to, make some stupid play or make some backhand pass, through the neutral zone that gets picked off the other way. I don't know. I always thought if you could make the play, it'd be great. I never thought that if I didn't make the play, how bad it would be on the other end. So, yeah, I definitely had a few chats with the coaches after a couple of bonehead plays.
Okay, one more thing on coaching, because another one of your former assistant coaches has also been a guest on this podcast before. So the Chaw says hello.
Oh yeah,
Brian Drum has
yeah,
been on this podcast, and he says I'm supposed to say hi to Lamb Choppy.
lamb choppy. Yes, yes. No, we so Brian and Rick Kornacki were my coaches my first year in Oshawa, and you know, I don't know if every new player to the OHL feels this way, but it's a big jump. And I was a 17-year-old getting drafted, and I was a first round pick, and it took me until Christmas time to feel anywhere near like I could play in the league. I've told people that there's a scene in the movie in Star Wars where they're on the Millennium Falcon and they decide let's put this thing into hyperspeed or whatever it is, and the way they shoot the scene is there's the stars out there, and all of a sudden they go into hyperdrive and the stars go by and it's like tubes going by them. Um, that's how I felt my first month in the OHL. I felt if I get a puck in the neutral zone, it felt like the players were whizzing by me at this light speed. Um, and I felt lost. I felt like I didn't belong. Um, but Brian Drum was my biggest fan, and he would treat me like a buddy, kind of like I guess how an assistant coach role should be done. He kept my spirits up. He would say to me, you know, I was getting chances, I just wasn't scoring, and he would say to me, you know, don't worry that you're not scoring because you're getting chances. He said, start worrying if you don't get chances. And so that helped me relax a little bit. And, you know, by the end of the year, I felt like I was, you know, able to play at that level. But yeah, there was times I remember coming home at Christmas time thinking, I don't know if I should go back. I found it was that difficult, the transition. But Brian was like that guy that just, yeah, he took me under his wing, and he certainly got me through the first half of that year for sure.
Was there a moment you remember, Ryan, where you're like, okay, I do belong here. I am fitting in. I'm starting to get it. Anything like that?
You know what? There was one game, and it was against the Newmarket Royals. It was a home game, and I had 6 points that night. I had a goal and 5 assists, and it never felt like I did anything different than I'd done all year. It just everything just sort of clicked, and then after that, it was like, okay, you do belong, and maybe that's as to say that confidence is the key, and once you feel confident, the game gets easier. Maybe that's all it was. Maybe I just needed one of those games to be like, yeah, you know what, you can score. You've done this before. You belong. And then after that, it felt a lot easier, and I felt like I belonged after that for sure.
I can't have a former Oshawa general on this podcast without asking about the Peterborough Petes. Still, for my money, the best rivalry the league has. What was it like for you as a player in that rivalry, of course?
Difficult. Yeah, intense. It was incredible. I actually the year I got drafted, we did a sort of a preseason. A bunch of guys did a preseason hockey camp, conditioning camp up on Manitoulin Island, and so I got the chance to meet Chad Lang that summer, and we skated together the whole summer. And they had just lost, I believe, the Memorial Cup the year before. I may be off on that, but I thought that was where they were. Anyway, so I knew Chad going into the season. And then, of course, I think we played 4 or 5 exhibition games against him in the preseason, and then the eight or 10 in the regular season. But it was intense. It was a huge rivalry. We had great battles through the years. I mean, Mike Martone, I've seen him, I think, on your podcast, and he ended up playing against me when he was St. FX. I'm good friends now with Kevin Ballbrook. We do some on ice development for kids in this area here. So he's a great friend now. But I tell the story when I played against him. I saw him from from my backside looking up at him most times. It was not, they were not easy to play against. Jamie Langenbrunner was an incredible player to play against, and he almost single-handedly beat us the year that Peterborough won in 7 in I think it was my second season. Luckily, we ended up flipping the switch for my 4th year and walked out of Peterborough with the win. But yeah, what a rivalry it was. But it was a good rivalry. It was never. I never felt like it was over the line dirty. It was tough. It was intense. And of course, having Drummy on the other side there at my last year was it made it even more special because it's fun to compete against your buddies. I find like you get a better effort when it's somebody on the other side that you know. I feel like it's just more fun out there to go out there and try and beat each other up. So yeah, great rivalry, and I'm glad I got a chance to participate in it.
What a traitor, though, Drummy, eh? Living in Oshawa and coaching in Peterborough, you can't do that stuff.
Well, so the interesting thing is that year was Bill Stewart was from the area. Bob Cajun, I think, is where he was, and both Oshawa and Peterborough had openings that year for their coaching position. And I think Bill was a little ticked off that Peterborough didn't hire him. And so when we went to when we played Peterborough in the playoffs that year, Bill said, "Listen, when we win this series, we're not shaking hands. We're walking right off the ice." And sure enough, we won in Game 6 in Peterborough, and we went and hugged our goalie, and we did the whole thing. And as we're turning around, Bill's on the ice, and he's pointing us into our dressing room. He's like, "You're gone. You're out of here." And we did. We walked off, which coaches good coaches can get a team to buy into what they're selling, and we bought it. We bought everything he was saying, and it was part of the reason why we became so successful in those playoffs. The us against the world mentality. It would have been nice to shake hands with some of those guys. Zach Burke, who I played against for 4 years. It would have been nice to say, great series and whatnot. But it was also we were so excited that we finally won a playoff series. That was my first one in 4 years. So we listened to the coach. We got off the ice, and I think 2 days later, David Branch find Oshawa and find Bill a healthy sum. But it was that was I don't think we've seen that since.
It's funny how we can talk about David Branch as the commissioner of the league and assessing that fine when you were playing, and we can still talk about David Branch, the commissioner today, running the Ontario Hockey League.
Yeah, and one thing that I forgot was at that Memorial Cup, Guy Lafleur was there as well as the host of the banquet. And so all 4 teams are there for their banquet, and there's the awards and everything else that night, and we're all sitting down having our dinner, and someone comes up with the idea that we should shoe check David Branch at the banquet. So, there was Lethbridge, there was Hull, I think it was Chicoutimi was the other team, and the guys are all saying, well, who's going to do it? Who's going to do it? So we drew the short straw, and it fell on our shoulders to shoe check Mr. Branch. So I was deemed to be the decoy, and my good friend Jeff Ware, who'd been drafted and signed by the Toronto Maple Leafs by that point and had nothing to lose by getting in trouble at the OHL level, decided he would be the person to do the actual planting of the shoe check on Mr. Branch. So I went around to the front of the table, introduced myself to Mr. Lafleur and Mr. Branch, and we talked. We'd already played a couple of games, and I don't remember what I said, but I probably rambled on like I am now long enough to allow my good friend to sneak under the table and put a little bit of mustard or mayonnaise or whatever it was on Mr. Branch's shoe undetected. And then we went back to the table, and all 4 teams chimed in and rang the glasses. It took about 3 minutes for Mr. Branch to realize that he was the one who had been shoe checked. And he looked down and immediately turned around and said, "Lindsay," he goes, "you're lucky you're done in this league." But it was that was a good moment for the team.
That is fantastic. Balls
Yeah.
too, Lindsay.
Yeah.
Balls.
Well, I guess I figured at the time. I mean, I wasn't doing it. I was just
Sure.
talking to them. I didn't know what Jeff Ware was up to, but you know, can't blame me. So, anyways, no, it was a good moment. Well, I think all four teams enjoyed that.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I'm just thinking about the current OHL championship that again is going on as we speak. As a former Gen, are you just a guy that like there's no possible way you could cheer for Peterborough right now? Do you pay any attention at all?
I do pay attention. But both franchises. I mean, what London has done over the time since I've been in the league. My third year London that year was 360-3. Um, at that point, would I ever think, looking down the line for the last 25 years, whatever it's been, that they'd be as successful as they have been? But they've been a model franchise to watch, and they've been fantastic. But also Peterborough. I mean, I don't cheer against them. When I played against them, I would have, but a lot of great people have gone through that organization. A lot of great people are in that organization, and I just hope it goes seven. I hope both teams get to have that experience, that it comes down to a game seven, and they get that same type of feeling that I was lucky enough to be part of.
It's such a great assessment, Ryan, because, wherever your allegiance might lie in the league, you nail it with what these franchises have done historically, especially London over the past 2 decades and a bit. And I'll bet you would have much preferred to play in Budweiser Gardens than in the old Ice House in London when you're going there, right?
Well, it's interesting because as a junior B player in St. Mary's, we
Oh
played against
yeah.
the London National, so we played in that rink quite a bit. And then the year of the OHL draft was in London at that arena, so I was drafted to Oshawa in that arena, and I certainly I enjoyed. I always had good games in that arena, but yeah, that new arena in London is fantastic. But again, also back to the Peterborough point I wanted to make is what a job they've done in today's age with the corporate sponsorships and how expensive it is to run a team in this league now. What they've done to get this far, it's tremendous, and the organization, they deserve tremendous for the accomplishment they've done.
Yeah, and it's great for the city. I mean, they love their Pete's in Peterborough, obviously, and it is great to see the success that they're having this year for sure. Was there an arena that you really didn't like to play in when you were in the O?
Oh, I'm trying to think, where was I at my worst? Probably a few rinks I can think about. I know the old Windsor barn we only went there once a year, thankfully, but that was a tough place to play. At Jovanovski, you know, uh, they were a menace to play against. Us fans were throwing pennies at us and nickels and stuff behind the net. Yeah, I've told this story many times. I said, playing against Jovanovski, I remember one time I was behind the net. I had the puck, and he hit me and he pinned me. And he pinned me so hard that I was, 6 inches off the ice. My feet couldn't even touch the ice. And he just held me there. And it was like, it was nothing for him. And I'm sitting here trying to fight, and I'm, you know, moving my feet and trying to get, and all of a sudden I realized, I'm like, what am I doing? I can't, he's stronger than me. I'm never gonna. So eventually I said, I just stopped fighting. And I said, they go, whenever you're ready to put me down, I'll go play again. And he just kind of giggled and let me go. And we went on. But yeah, Windsor was a hard place to play. And early on in the day, Belleville was hard with the Olympic ice. And at that point they had Cleary and Richard Park, Brian Secord. They had some great teams. And I remember one night, I think we got smoked 8-9-10-2, something like that. And they had that bullhead in the end of the arena that would blow smoke every time they scored a goal. And I swear to God, that night the thing ran out of steam because they had so many goals. But that was a tough place to play. It was yeah, there was a bunch of places that were hard to play, but I loved it. It was every minute of being a general and being in that league as a little boy growing up, getting the chance to play that, it was a privilege, and it was awesome being there. So, I still look back and think about how much fun that was.
How do you feel about the game today, Ryan, versus the game the way it was played when you were in the league?
Um, I mean, the players are so much more athletic now than we were back in the day. Um, the big change I see obviously is the hooking, the holding. Um, would I have had a better chance now than I did then if I was the same player? Maybe, but maybe not. Like I said, like I was a quick skater. I wasn't the fastest guy. Um, but on the other side, I also got away with, on the defensive side, I could hook a guy in his waist all the way down the ice and just go for the ride and slow him up that way. Whereas now you can't do that. So um, I like the game. I think it's a they're definitely better athletes. Um, I wish there was a bit more physicality, but I also think that it's hard because the concussion side of things and the hits to the head, and I don't want to see that anymore. But it's a tremendously fast game and super talented, and the way the guys shoot the puck now, it's incredible. So it's definitely a better athletic game now. But I definitely miss the old days. I think where there was line brawls every couple of weeks. You'd have a line brawl, and not that I was ever good in that or wanted to be involved in it, but it definitely added to the spice of the league, and I'm sure the fans enjoyed it too.
Yeah, I think we're kind of at this point where we're searching for that balance again a little bit, right? I'm with you, with the hooking and stuff out of the game that speeds it up and allows those athletic players to be athletes, but we're just a little bit on the wrong side, I think, of the physicality still. Not that we want headhunting, players being injured, but we're just looking for that balance again, I think.
Yeah, and I don't know where it comes in. I mean, you watch the NHL playoffs right now. Watching that Florida team, they're big, they're fast, they're physical. So I think there's room in the game for it. But it's interesting to watch at the NHL level that doesn't happen in the 82 games very often. It's pretty much up and down. Let's get through this game safe and get to the next one. But you watch the NHL playoffs, and I've been a fan watching so far this year of how physical that is. But again, I don't think you can do that for 82 games. So I think somewhere a happy medium in between the physicality that you see in the playoffs and yet the lack of that in the regular season. I think it would be nice to see somewhere in between in the regular season, but it might just be too hard on everyone's bodies to do that.
What led to your decision, Ryan, after winning that championship with UNB to hop over to the Team Canada side and play internationally?
Um, that's interesting. So we finished the year. It was a great year. We win the national championship, first in the school's history. They've now have, I think, 8 or 9, just for those St. FX fans that may be listening. Mike Kelly was leaving. He was hired to go back and to the OHL. He became coach GM with North Bay. So he was leaving. And I had actually a tryout with the Maple Leafs first. And so I went to the rookie camp. It was actually in Kitchener. And we did the rookie camp in Kitchener. And at the end of that camp, I didn't make it onto main camp, but they had mentioned that the national team had asked if perhaps I want to go try out there. And at that point, I didn't even know what the national team was. But I also was like, well, shoot, school's starting and I don't know what to do. And my mom actually said, school will always be there. You can always go back. Why don't you go try and see what happens at this training camp in Calgary? So I went out and had a good camp, and they said, we're going to sign you. We'd like you to be part of the national team. And this is how it works. You live in Calgary for the year. You become a nationally carded athlete, so you get paid, a bit of a salary. You represent Canada in all the international tournaments. We play exhibition games. You train every day at the Father David Bauer Arena, and at the end of the year, there's a chance that you get signed on to a AHL, an IHL, an East Coast League team. And if you don't, and you want, you go back to school, and they give you a bit of money to go back to school. So it became a situation where I thought, yeah, I'll take a year and do this and represent the Team Canada and live that life. And so it was amazing. I got to play with a former general in Fred Brathwaite that year. He was the goaltender for us. He had played in the NHL already, and he'd been in the AHL, and he was looking for a way to sort of get back to the NHL, and thought that this might be a path to get there. And I had watched him in the '90 final, and I remember he was the goalie on the bench when Kevin Butt got injured halfway through the Memorial Cup final, and Fred Brathwaite came in and slammed the door and won the Memorial Cup. And so getting to play with him and telling him that story, how I'd watched him, and I said, I was always really impressed, Fred, that you went down right away and consoled Mike Torcha. He'd let in the winning goal, and I saw you give him the hug, and that was awesome. And he said, yeah, but Linz, he goes, the truth was, I wanted that game puck. So, at least that's what he said to me, which was fantastic. Great Freddie Brathwaite line. But getting to that national team, yeah, Mike Johnson and Willie Desjardins were the coaches. Doug Lidster was a player assistant that year. Troy Stonier, a good friend that's become a great friend of mine, was there. I mean, it was just a great group of guys. And yeah, getting to play in Russia and visiting Moscow, like it was amazing feeling. We flew everywhere and wore our Team Canada blazer, and it was just something I never thought would ever happen to me. And we were lucky enough to win the Spengler Cup. And when we got back from the Spengler Cup, here's the interesting thing about Fred Brathwaite. Calgary had gone through 6 or 7 goalies that year. Everyone kept getting injured, and we got back and first day we're watching the news, and Fred Brathwaite's net playing for Calgary. So he had played so well at the Spengler Cup, and Calgary needed their 6th or 7th goalie that year. They signed him, and I don't know if he got them into the playoffs, but they came right down to the wire of getting there, and he earned his contract for the next year, and I think he played another 4 or 5 different seasons in the NHL after that. So that's how that Team Canada thing came up. It was kind of a fluke, but I'm glad my mom said, take the chance and go. And and I remember thinking at the time, well, if I don't go, maybe I'll go next year or the year after. And sure enough, 2 years later, the program folded. They decided that they didn't need to fund a national program anymore, considering that the World Championships were NHL guys representing, and the year before that was the first year the NHL players went to the Olympics. So they decided that this was the Olympic team, but they didn't need that anymore with the NHL now participating. So they ended it. So if I hadn't gone then, I never would have had the opportunity. So I was quite fortunate.
That's a terrific experience. And, we hear from a lot of guys that leave from junior, and if it's not working out in pro, they'll go to Europe and play pro hockey there. You get that very similar experience traveling around with the national team like that.
Yeah, and we played everywhere. We played in Sweden, we played in Finland, and played in Norway, Japan. Actually played against the Japan national team, and one of my friends from growing up in Hamilton was playing for the Japan national team, Ryan Kuwabara, who's now the head coach of the Niagara Ice Dogs just down the street here. So being in Japan and playing a couple games against them, and hanging out with Ryan after the game, and him showing us some of the restaurants and places to go in Japan. It was, experience of a lifetime for sure.
We talked earlier about the championship with Quad City in the UHL, and you were a part of a streak of 6 straight 50+ win seasons with that club. Were you aware of it at the time, and how much pressure was there, if you were, to get to that magical mark?
Yeah, so I played on 2 of those teams, and I think it was the second year I played. That year was actually, I should have mentioned this gentleman, Paul McLean, was our coach that year.
Oh my gosh,
amazing coach. Yeah, it was the drive for 5. I think at that point it was to become the first professional franchise, I think, to get 5 50-win seasons. I believe that's what it was at the time. Pressure, there wasn't a lot of pressure. We had a great team that year. The team was loaded with great players, and a great coach, and the organization. the ownership group, general manager Howard Cornfield, they treated us like gold. The booster club, the fans, we probably average 8,000-9,000 fans a game for in the United Hockey League, which was tremendous. Pressure, no, there really wasn't a lot of pressure. I think that year we finished something like, I don't know, 58-12 or something. It was a really good team. It was a good year. And winning that, getting that 50 win mark was special. And yeah, there's a plaque in the Hall of Fame, and the Hockey Hall of Fame that has that. And it's kind of neat taking my kids in there and they get to see that. It was pretty special. So yeah, great organization.
I don't care what league you're in. 6 straight 50+ win seasons is a really incredible run.
Yeah, and honestly, at that level, I know back in the day, you know, people have seen some of the under the table stuff that does go on with, you know, I think it was the Danforth team that sort of brought that to light on that special. But you know, from my knowledge with Quad City, they did it the right way. They made sure that the players were treated right off the ice. And therefore the players that went there wanted to go and win a championship. They went there for the right reasons. But again, it was just, you know, you surround yourself with good people and quality people, and you're more than likely going to end up on top, you know, in the grand scheme of things. And that was certainly what that organization was all about.
Why did you decide to hang them up when you did? How did you know it was time?
So I finished my 2 years in Quad Cities, and I decided I was actually going to possibly go to Europe the next year. And I was back home in Hamilton for the summer skating and getting ready to go. And I was at Hess Village, and I met my future wife. I met her. I had known her as an elementary school student, and I hadn't seen her in probably 15 or 20 years, whatever the number was. And we bumped into each other. We had a good conversation, and we started dating. And about 2 weeks later, I decided that I needed to go back to school, finish my degree, because the hockey career probably wasn't going to go where I wanted to go. And I didn't think that this woman who is now a teacher in the Hamilton system was going to follow me around to some of the places you get to play with, and when you're in the, you know, the minor leagues. And so I decided to go back to school, and I went back out to UNB. Had to sit out for 2 years or for a year. But I wanted to go back and finish my degree, and I was able to play hockey 2 more years out there. To which, you know, obviously I finished off with my helping my good childhood friends, you know, win their championship. And, you know, as my mom always said, you know, it's good to share things, you know. And at that point, you know, my good friends Mikey and Troy hadn't really won much in their lives, and I'd won so many. I figured maybe it'd be nice to let them have their cake. So
yeah, throw them a bone, those Smith guys.
Exactly.
Eh? Yeah.
You know. So, but it was at the end of that season. I was 27 years old and playing university hockey, and I thought it was time to sort of get on with it and sort of look at the next phase of getting into a business. And so, yeah, I moved back home to Hamilton and decided that I played 1 year with the real McCoys. And then just, that was enough. It was just too much working and also trying to play, you know, the senior league hockey, that it was too much. And I sort of wanted to just get into new things. And hockey had been a great part of my life, but I wanted to sort of venture off and do some other things that I had never done. So, 27 or 28, I guess I decided that was enough.
When you mentioned travel and some of those minor league experiences, what was that like in Quad Cities? What was travel like in the UHL?
It was amazing. So the bus that they had for the team was a converted sort of a rock star bus, where there were, you know, 18 bunks. There was satellite dish. The fridge was always full of liquids. You know, getting to travel on a bus where you can sort of lay down and sleep and read and do whatever you want, listen to music or play cards or whatever, as opposed to flying in an airplane where you have to sort of wear your suit and you're flying commercial and you know, there's delays and it actually was a pretty neat way to travel. And they did things right in Quad Cities. We would always go to a road game the day before, get in on time, have a nice dinner at a nice steakhouse, and get in and have a good rest, get up in the morning, have a skate. It was never, drive 12 hours and play that day. They treated us really well. In the town of Quad Cities, several restaurants would sponsor the team, and you'd have free meals at certain restaurants, it was travel was great there, and the city was fantastic. It was a lot of fun.
What keeps you connected to the game today? We've talked about the coaching you do with kids, etc. What keeps you involved?
It has to be the kids. I have two boys and a girl. They've all played hockey. My daughter has decided, she's the youngest. She's decided this year she got into volleyball, which was her mother's sport. Her mom's was a volleyball player at McMaster, and quite a good volleyball player. And so now my daughter's decided to follow in those footsteps. And I love watching the sport. That's great. The boys, I have one who was a U16 last year and one that was a U14. I've had the opportunity to coach both of their teams over the last couple of years. Without them playing, I probably wouldn't have gotten back into this sport. But because they're involved, I figured I should probably help out where I can, come on the ice and help as assistant coaching role or open a door or whatnot, and just sort of help out where I can. And it's been great, and it's been fun sort of using some of those lessons that those men I've talked about before taught me, and passing it on to these younger guys. And it's great. I think it's what it's all about. It's helping the next person along and doing what you can to see them succeed.
Would you recommend the OHL route to a young hockey player today?
I find this is the interesting thing. I find that the draft now being a 16-year-old draft, whereas in my day, you could get drafted as a 16-year-old, but you had to be drafted in the first 3 rounds. And at that time, a team could only take 2 16-year-olds in the first 3 rounds. So in today's draft, it's still the same way. The top 2 rounds are 16-year-old players that are most likely going to play this year. But really from the 4th round and beyond, I don't feel a lot of those players are ready to play anyway. So they'll probably develop in U18 or junior B or junior A, or maybe they get signed and they just practice all year and sit on the bench. I don't know. I feel if you're mature enough to go and you're going to get ice time, it's not a bad. It's a great opportunity for you. But I think it's hard. I think a lot of players aren't really ready till they're 17, almost 18 by the time they're ready to play at that level, unless of course you're again one of those top 15 or 30 players that are getting drafted at 16 that are ready to go now. But no, I think it's a great league. I love what they're doing with the education. I love what they're doing with trying to make sure that things are cleaned up. I think they're going in the right direction for sure. And I would recommend it for a kid who's ready to go play for sure.
It's interesting when you talk about that 16-year-old draft and what it had been like, et cetera. And it brings up the whole aspect of development, right? And where are you going to develop better as a player? Where are you going to be getting ice time, including special teams, et cetera, or 4th line minutes in the O? Like, what's best for that young hockey player?
Yeah, and honestly, it's a case by case basis. It really is. So my son this year, he was a U16, played here for the Niagara North, didn't get drafted. But I told him, when I was your age at the exact same time, our draft was you had to be in the first 3 rounds. And at my time when I was his age as a 16 or 15-year-old turning 16, I was nowhere near the top 300 players in the province at that point. And the next year I ended up trying out for a junior B team and made the team. Dave McQueen was my coach. And all of a sudden things just clicked. I got ice time. I was on the power play. I penalty killed. I ended up being the team's leading scorer and finished, in the top of the league in scoring. But if you had looked at my game the year before as a major Bantam, you'd say there's no way that that guy was going to be a leading scorer in junior B the next year, and conversely becoming a first round pick in the OHL as a 17-year-old. So, in my case, that worked out for me. There's other cases where, you go and you play U18 and maybe you hire a skating coach in the off for the season, or maybe you do other things away from the U18 that develops your game. Because again, I don't see a lot of 16-year-olds, even 17-year-olds with a huge impact on the league. There's some, but the majority they don't make an impact till they're 18, 19 years old. So yeah, I think that 17-year-old year, that 16, 17-year-old year for a lot of kids, you don't need to be playing junior A or tier 2 or whatever it is, junior B, in order to make it. You need to find a place where you're going to get better. And that may be playing U18, it may be playing junior A. It's case by case basis for sure.
For a guy that said at the beginning of this, it's been a long time since you've had the chance or been asked to talk about your time in the OHL. I feel like we could go another full hour here, Linz. This has been a ton of fun. Thanks so much for doing it.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out, and I'm glad the internet worked better tonight than the other night when we tried to get this thing going. So
great, that's okay.
No, this has been great, and I appreciate you asking me, and yeah, to all those guys that we've talked about before tonight, and to the guys that have made an impact on me through their teachings, just a big thank you from my heart. I think you've helped make me a better person. In fact, I know you have, and I'm hoping to pass that on to the next generation.
I just want to make sure this goes on the record too, because I think I said it before we started recording. So anybody that's just listening to this, make sure you check out the YouTube channel so you can see the backyard this guy's sitting in front of. You did say, right? I'm going to be able to come over there for beers and we'll talk more hockey.
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Bring the crew, and we'll maybe your associate producer there, and we'll get him a beer or two.
I love it. Linz, thank you so much for this.
All right. Thank you so much too. Appreciate it.